we're looking forward to that. We're also going to be bringing you live jazz to Larchmere Arts on the 28th of this month. It's a couple of Fridays from now. Ed Ridley, Elijah Gilmore, Brad McGee, and vocalist Gloria Cummings Jones. So you can also get details on that performance on the Facebook page for Larchmere Arts. Without any further ado, we would like to welcome our guest. She is Dr. Terry Lynn Carrington. She doesn't probably hear that a lot, but she is a multiple Grammy Award winning drummer, producer, and educator. She's recorded and toured with Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Stan Getz, Diane Reeves, David Sanborn, John Schofield, Diana Krall, Yellow Jackets, Cassandra Wilson, and countless other jazz luminaries. She made history as the first woman to win a Grammy Award in the Best Jazz Instrumental Album category for Money Jungle, Provocative in Blue, a reimagining of the Duke Ellington classic, her collaborations with Esperanza Spalding and Jerry Allen, as well as her female-driven Mosaic Project recordings, have received critical acclaim. So much more that we can share about her, but we are going to bring her into the studio right now. And I got to tell you, Ms. Carrington, if I can call you that, I spent the evening listening to your music and I was blown away by your vocabulary. Both of us, Brother Hamtonio and myself, are percussionists. I play piano, he plays drums, African drums, and other things. But I listened to your vocabulary. I listened to a lot of the songs that have their beginnings, and I hear your distinctive voice on the drums. And I just want to compliment you on that and tell you that when I think about Terry Lynn Carrington, I think about Hazel Scott. I think about Dorothy Donegan. I think about musicians on that level who were pioneers in the field of jazz, and I see you carrying that torch forward. So with all of that, I'd like to welcome you to 360 Info Network.
Well, thank you so much. What an introduction. Hazel Scott and Dorothy Donegan. That's amazing. I did play with Dorothy Donegan actually before she passed. So thank you for
Wow.
putting me in that light. Yes.
Yes.
Amazing women
Well, I mean, you
instrumentalists.
deserve it. Yes. NEA Jazz Master, won Grammys and done all the things that you do. I think you really deserve that. One of the things that prompted this is you coming to Cleveland on the 28th of March to perform with the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra. And I can tell you that a lot of folks are excited about this. I've had conversations with several drummers, and I'm telling them, hey, don't do a gig on the 20th and play her drum. So really looking forward to that. We will put links up on the description for this video so you can take advantage of it. She will be performing at the Moss Performing Arts Center on Friday, March 28th. It begins at 7:30 p.m. And again, I will post a link in the description for this video so you can get your tickets, and we want to fill up the place. So you've done a project recently, and it has a theme dealing with freedom to you.
I'm having trouble. I don't know if
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering, was I just doing it? Yeah, he's breaking
yeah,
up a little
he's
bit.
breaking up. Yeah. But I
Yeah, I was
think you
asking.
asked about Freedom Day.
Yes.
Um, so this is a single that came out yesterday. In fact, it's a single from my forthcoming album, which is called "We Insist 2025," and it's a reimagining of Max Roach and Abby Lincoln's "We Insist" that came out in 1960. So Freedom Day is one of the songs, one of the signature songs from the original album, and it was very fast uh, and very sparse, lots of drums and rhythm, and not there was no piano, it was voice and horns and drums. So my spin on it is making it a ballad and uh, kind of looking at the lyrics differently and trying to interpret them, thinking about freedoms that we are facing and dealing with today, especially as women in specifically Black women. So hopefully that all comes through, even though we did not change the text that was written by Oscar Brown Jr. But I think it shows you the power of music and how you can approach this rhythm and harmony in a way to help tell a story differently. So this single came out yesterday, but the album doesn't come out until June. So every month, you know, between now and then, there'll be another single coming out.
Okay. And I think if I'm not mistaken, Weedy Brema was one of the musicians that you worked with on that album. So talk to us about your relationship with Weedy, the musician.
Oh, Weedy is great. This was the first time we played together, and actually it wasn't really together because I brought him to Boston after we recorded to overdub all of his parts. But this is the first project we did together, and he's super special, just an amazing djembe fola, and his mother played the drums. So there was that kind of connection. I think, you know, she knew about me as well. So he felt, you know, a bit of a full circle moment when we met and connected. And I'm so glad that he's on it because he brings a certain, you know, authenticity to the project that's rooted in Olatunji, who played on the first We Insist album. He understood this Nigerian history and the rhythms that were played, and he was able to connect it authentically to this new project.
Yeah.
Well, I will mention as an aside that our brother Hamtonio has worked with Weedy as well. There's a local group, Japo Cultural Arts, and his beloved Talise Campbell is the founder, and she's the engine of that particular organization. And Brother Hamtonio also plays African drums, so he's had the privilege of playing with him. I want to play some of that song, so I'm going to pull that up. And as I do, could you tell us some of the other folks?
Yes, so playing on this track is Milena Casado on trumpet, Morgan Guerin on bass and woodwinds, Matthew Stevens on guitar, and Simon Millier on vibes. Of course, I'm on drums. And the amazing Christy Dashiell is singing. And the album is actually co-led by Christy and myself because it is a vocal album. So I thought it would be appropriate for both of us to have the billing. So hopefully you enjoy it.
Okay. All right. Ready, Vince?
Yes. Can you hear it?
Okay.
Mhm.
Get it a
Yes.
little bit now. Mm-hmm.
I hear it. Oh, I see. It's not.
Can you raise it a little bit?
That's as high as it goes.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, that's better. Yeah.
Can't believe it, but that's what they say. Oh, slave no longer, slave no longer. This is Freedom Day. Oh, Freedom Day. It's Freedom Day.
So that's an excerpt from a song, Freedom Song. It was just released yesterday. So folks in Cleveland are privileged to be among the first to hear it. And I will post a link to that on the description for this video as well. And I would encourage you to pursue that. I listened to it on Spotify. Terry, do you have a website or something that we can steer folks towards to obtain your music?
Sure, it's terrylynncarrington.com. But it's available on all of your streaming platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, and YouTube, and wherever you purchase music. So it's easy to find.
Yeah. I'm going to ask this question now. I was deliberating on whether I wanted to broach this subject, but you know, the world of music has changed just based on the fact that we are sharing music digitally this way. Once upon a time, it was cassettes and albums, and now we've got MP3 files and whatnot. And what has happened as a result of that is that many musicians have lost their ability to generate income from their product because they get so little of it, because folks can pay $10.99 a month or whatever it is now and get all this music, not necessarily for free, but at a tremendous discount. How important is it for you as a musician to have control of your product and get the maximum benefit from the monetization of it?
Well, I mean, technology is going to develop no matter what. And I think that we have to deal with it, but also deal with it in a way that we're making it work for us too. We can't fight what has happened with technology, and we can't, look back at how it used to be with, wanting it to be that again, because that's just not going to happen. So the way I see it is I really just tried to embrace what was happening and understand it. There are some benefits to streaming, and because you keep having engagement with your audience. Every time somebody listens to a song, we can see that, right? So we have a whole different outlook on how your music is being consumed. Whereas when you buy an album or a CD, you don't know what happens. You don't know if people are still listening to it. That is the end of your engagement really with them, unless they come to a show. So that leads me to the other thing. It makes performance even more important for artists, which can separate, as they say, the Joes from the schmoes, or the Joes from the pros. And I think, if you're a performer, you just look at it like your living is made from that, maybe more from that than your album sales. But you're also now able to bring CDs and albums with you and sell them that way. And most people, if they're with a label, or if a lot of people just print them themselves, so you're able to, even if you do buy them from a label, you buy them at such a discount, but you're able to make money on selling them yourself. And a lot of collectors are still really buying albums. It's becoming fashion again. I don't buy albums because it's a lot. I don't carry them on the road to sell them either. And I'm fine with listening to music digitally. But some people really want to, have an album. So, and albums are expensive, so you do make some money when you sell your albums. So, I mean, and streaming, like, even though the money is much less, it's going to, if the record is being played, it's going to still trickle in over time. Whereas when you used to sell albums or CDs and that was it, you made your money then for the most part, and then it just dropped down to nothing. But now, if you're lucky, you can keep kind of a something going, even if it's not as much.
Mm-hmm. That brings me to another question, and that is exposure of you as an artist to particularly younger folks. When I bring up the name Terry Lynn Carrington, for some, the reference to create relatability is the Arsenio Hall show, because, we're not really as into jazz as we could be. There's a small population of students, I would say, that are into the music because that's what they are about. But when it comes to the masses of people, when you talk about jazz, often the name Kenny G will come up, or someone who's achieved a certain modicum of popular music success, but not necessarily folks who are into the hardcore stuff.
Mhm.
So just curious about your connection to younger folks, and I know as an educator you have that connection, but do you ever get a sense that based on what we're hearing in popular music, and I'm speaking in terms of hip hop, that there might be a disconnect between younger audiences and jazz?
Well, yeah, there's a disconnect, and it's not even just younger audiences because hip hop started when I was a teenager. So we're celebrating 50 years of hip hop. So there's a lot of people my age and just a little bit younger that's their music. Um, Jazz is always going to be there. It's not going anywhere. It's high art, and it's you know I think people have to understand the continuum of Black music, and you're always going to have people that are only interested in what's popular, uh, and they're just into pop culture. That's why jazz is really under 2% of what's consumed in this country, and hip hop is of 33%. So there's a vast difference, and there's only that because it's not just Black people listening to hip hop. If it were, it would never be 33%. Uh,
Mm.
so we have to look at the history of Black music. We can look at reasons. I mean, there's some people, some very famous jazz people, that say that jazz really is what happened in the 40s and the 50s, and that's it. And I don't believe that at all. Jazz has evolved and continues to grow. That was kind of the point of it. We started off with, whatever ragtime and the blues and stride, and then we got into the swing era, and then we went into the bebop era, which was really one of the most phenomenal times of music because these people invented a whole new language. And then we got into the post-bop era, and then you have Miles Davis, that played this new music. Then we had jazz fusion, and it just kept going. So it's still a very fertile time for jazz because the young musicians now are combining the things of their generation that they've heard, right? So they're combining gospel and hip hop and R&B and rock with their jazz. So I love it, and I have a radio show on Sirius XM called Future Flavors, and I focus on those kinds of hybrids. There's also a new category that I helped to create at the Recording Academy, and it's called alternative jazz. And for me, it's really that is jazz, and the normal jazz category is really more classic jazz. But that's not how the names developed. So we're keeping jazz as jazz. We added a new category, and that's for these hybrids. Uh, so I think it's exciting, and we just have to keep educating our young people. I also think that these institutions, I mean, we have, of course, music institutions, and they make it a lot harder for the young African Americans to study jazz because, this kind of merit system that's developed on what you have to know and how you have to play to get in. And, that needs to be examined and, amended. And also the other institutions like the church, the Black church is a real music institution. And I feel like it could be more expansive with how it teaches music as well, so that these young Black musicians have more options.
Yes. Definitely, there's a deficit when it comes to music education. You take, for instance, a city like Cleveland. We have a School of the Arts in the Cleveland Municipal School District, but that means that there's one school that folks have an opportunity to be involved in the music, but then all the others don't provide the same opportunity. And it's really sad that, you know, when it comes to cuts in education, one of the first things to go is art in the schools. You know, we sometimes focus on the technical things, you know, engineering, math, technology, that type of thing, but we don't necessarily immerse students in art. And art can be one of the things that really helps in the evolution of a student. There are some
Mhm.
who say that being involved with music makes them better students. Talk to us about
I don't
your
know. Oh, go ahead.
involvement in music and education. We had another hiccup. I was asking you to talk to us about your
Mhm.
involvement in music and education.
Yes. Well, I went to Berklee College of Music I started there when I was 11. I got a full scholarship when I was 11. So I've had a long relationship with the college. Um, I left when I was 18 and I moved to New York for 5 years, then to Los Angeles for 17 years, and came back for the last 20 years back to Boston to teach at Berkeley. And about, let's see, I guess about 7 or 8 years ago, I started the Berkeley Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice to help address this gender problem that we have in jazz and also in learning institutions. Because I spoke to some students who were having a hard time. Some were quitting, teachers weren't being kind to them. And when I finally opened up my heart and my ears and my mind to the fact that they did not have the same experience that I had coming up, I felt like I had to do something, at least where I worked, and then also do something to make a wider, to help in the collective work of making a wider cultural shift and really transforming this how women are viewed and how women are supported in the music. And a lot of people are addressing this in various ways. So it takes that kind of uh, collective work for any kind of movement to happen. So we're slowly getting there. But, you can probably list the women on a couple of hands,
Mhm.
whose albums you have, whose tickets you buy, who you go to see, who you support in these ways. And that's what needs to really shift. We have to make more space, not just for women to assimilate and try to play like they're male heroes, but we have to make space for their own authentic sound and possibly a different sound in the music. Because everybody that I tried to simulate, were all men. So if I, wasn't playing as good as the next guy, then I wasn't going to work. And so I
Mhm.
have to now look at what does that mean to me? Like what things might I have squashed in my own development because I have to assimilate in this way. So we have to have bigger ears. There's a book called Big Ears by Sherry Tucker and Nicole Rustin um, that's talking about this, and there's a lot of different essays by scholars talking about how we have to have bigger ears, but we also have to just open things up for this kind of cultural shift. So our institute has a slogan: "Jazz without patriarchy," and we're wondering and we're asking the question: What would the music sound like? On a stage without bias. Uh, in a culture without patriarchy, and in a classroom that's radically inclusive.
Yes, radically inclusive. I like that. You talked just a few moments ago about being a woman in a field that's dominated by men, and I know that it was something that you took upon your shoulders to have an impact upon. And it seems to me, and again, I indicated that I listened to a lot of your music last night. It seemed to me that you had a certain level of energy that shows how important it was for you to demonstrate that you were just as good as, or if not just as good, better than some of the counterparts that you have dealt with in the field.
Mhm. So you're asking me like if I feel that way about myself? I mean, yeah. I mean,
No,
every
I'm asking.
uh,
Yeah, I'm
okay.
asking you if you had a certain sense that you had to prove yourself as a drummer
Yeah,
in a field that's dominated by men.
absolutely. And that's what every woman has to do. And that's what's not fair because we're not asking you to do that. You know what I mean? It's like if you were playing sports, and first of all, music is not sports. And that's, I think, one of the first problems, because all of these masculine traits have become so uh, embedded in the fabric of the music that everybody's saying that's what jazz is. But there's reasons for, back in the early part of the 20th century, why women weren't able to participate. Society was a lot different, and your safety was a big factor. When slavery ended, you know, people could travel, but men could travel much easier than women. It wasn't as safe for women. So now you have people that could make their living playing a guitar or a harmonica or whatever, a violin or whatever they played. They could travel to cities and they would play in brothels too, and brothels and bars and places that it wasn't really acceptable for proper women. And I say that with exclamation points of to be in. So the whole thing started without including women, and it just kind of stayed that way, and the sound kept developing, and it became like the sound of freedom. And we all know that in the 60s, during the civil rights era, there were a lot of women participating, but their roles were known to be more, organizing, and you saw more men on the front line. So it's the same thing that we were seeing in the music. It's like it's men's work to play jazz, which is hilarious, because that's not the case, and that's really cutting out half the population with that have the intellect and heart and talent to do this. So how could jazz profess to be so forward thinking and so important to the freedom struggles and not include women? I mean, does that make any sense? I don't think so.
No.
And it's not men's music
And when you
because
look
I'm not a man.
at
It's my music. I try to tell that to all of our students. This is your music if this is what you want it to be.
yeah,
And nobody can tell
right.
me that it's not mine. So I can't believe ever that this is men's music.
Mm.
Mm, mm. Just quickly, and I'm sure Brother Antonio has some questions he wants to ask you, but just thinking about this paradigm
Okay, you went out again
shift
on
that
us. Okay.
we're seeing in terms of funding for the arts and the pushback on DE&I.
Uh-oh. You went out on us.
I see where he's going though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if you wanted to comment about the reality that we're facing right now with the pushback on DEI and how that might affect what you're doing in that world.
Mm.
I think it's really we've got to look at it as being inspiring to continue the work that we're doing. This is nothing new. We thought we were someplace. If anything, it's a wake-up call. But this is something that our ancestors and not too distant ancestors had to deal with on the regular, and that wasn't that long ago. So I think there was a bit of an illusion of how far we've come, and you can see how quickly things can be dismantled.
Mm.
So if anything, it we have to look back at the strength and fortitude that our grandparents and great grandparents had in trying to make these changes happen. And we have to draw upon that and do the same thing. We have to keep the work that we're doing, um, elevated. We have to keep doing it. We have to stay energized because now it's needed more than ever. And so, anybody that's an artist or doing
That's
any
true.
kind of work in the way of social justice, now is the time we have to roll up our sleeves and dig in. We can't become paralyzed because of what's happening. So our only choice is to roll up our sleeves and figure out ways to combat this craziness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that the song Freedom Song is that counter narrative that is providing energy to what you just expressed to us. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's one. And there's like, so many, people working through this, through their art. And I mean, what's incredibly poignant is that this piece was originally written in 1960. And the fact that we're able to look at this same lyric and, shape it differently with, maybe contemporary music, but we're able to look at the same lyric and it still be poignant today is it's kind of not what we expected. Because I thought when I started working on this, the election hadn't happened. So I thought that I was just paying tribute, to Max and also looking at the freedom struggles of today, but they weren't what they've become yet. You know what I mean? So I was, looking through, my work with gender justice and through what's happening with women's uh, their autonomy with their bodies and all the issues that we were looking at. But it's gotten even, crazier. So yes, this song and the whole album is kind of dedicated to these kinds of freedom struggles.
Yes. Well, I can tell you definitively that I'm anxious to hear the rest of the album. Brother Antonio, did you have anything that you wanted to ask Sister Terry?
Well, yes, yeah. It seems like with us that's a continuing struggle always, and uh, using the music as a tool to to get the messaging out. It's definitely and always been a powerful message to do that. And what I guess you're describing too about how the challenges that women have in that particular arena that you're in. I don't know if would you say that's just in the jazz arena, or is it across the board with everything? But it sounds um, like what black folks normally have to go through, where to be on pretty much on any position, you got to be twice as good to get in the door. So that may be something that you can relate to as being a female trying to break into that particular arena, and so.
I've broken in.
Yeah,
I've broken in. It's like
Yeah.
there's just so many people that
Mhm.
are dealing with what you're saying, and what's crazy is how an oppressed group
Mhm.
hasn't quite learned all the lessons from being oppressed, so that
Mhm.
it's just I think almost I don't want to say human nature, but it seems that oppressed people still tend to oppress others. But I don't even think it's that as much as it is society saying that this is just how it is and it's
Mm.
okay. So people just not quite realizing that their actions are harmful. And that's why I get to have really beautiful conversations with so many male musicians that I love dearly and can talk to about this uh, because I don't blame them. It's systemic.
Right.
It's not like a person trying to be mean. It's just the whole world has told you that you're a genius and that your brothers are geniuses, and this is the way it's supposed to sound. and you're excelling in this, and then you're bringing along the other people with you that sound like you, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has kind of bought that Kool-Aid or sipped that Kool-Aid, including myself.
Ooh. Okay.
You know, there's many women that have participated, uh, you know,
Just felt they
in
fell in line then with what's going on. Okay.
yeah, because I didn't want to play with women because that meant that maybe I wasn't playing with the best.
Ah.
See what I
Okay.
mean? So I
Mhm,
was like, I had
mhm,
to go through a whole journey to
mhm.
be able to say, okay, let me, you know, let me understand this differently, and then let me be an example.
Right.
Because it takes more work sometimes, you know, to get to search. There's not as many people. It's the same thing, you know, with black folks, you know, being hired, you know, with before DE and I, right, or the work that it would take, you know, if you weren't aware of whose talent is available to you, and
Mhm.
if there were systemic things through whatever education or internships or job opportunities that wasn't bringing everyone's talent
The
to
forefront.
the top,
Mhm.
right? So it's kind of like, then you, if you care about it at all, then you have to spend more time, more energy. Sometimes
Mhm.
you win, sometimes you lose. You know, sometimes you believe in somebody and they don't quite hit the mark. Sometimes you believe in somebody and that gives them wind beneath their wings. And most times I think it's going to be that, right? So you have to, you know, just look at, you know, your own belief system, and if you're going to be a part of changing things, or if you're going to be a part of keeping things
It's like,
remaining as they are.
and that's what I want to touch on a little bit. You know, we over here in 360 Info consider ourselves somewhat a conscientious show. And every time, you know, we do have guests on, I always want to get to the meat of some of the challenges in which we're talking about some of the challenges that African Americans have in any marketplace that we have a conversation about. And one of the things that has disturbed me over the years is the business side of the entertainment industry. And you know, I don't know what advice or what you can offer him, but it just seems like that is just a rhetorical, just a problem. We still getting into bad contracts. I don't know if it's just we get suckered in for the fluff, for the money of being out there and our name, you know, and we tend to get into bad situations after bad situations. I mean, just hey, just look recently. We talked, you know, we Angie Stone was having issues. You
Mhm.
know, now how you know how famous she was and the things that she's done and things like that. And but she had some problems with her management. You know,
Mhm.
still today in 2025, we still going through these problems. You know, so anything you could touch on that or information that you can help somebody navigate that or some of the things you may have went through that the next person shouldn't have to deal with.
Mhm. Yes, I mean, you touch on something that's really near and dear to my heart as well. I think as long as you have greed and capitalism, these things will exist. And it's going to be up to the people, the artists, to study. You know, there's so much information on the internet now that we actually do have access to the
Mhm,
information.
mhm,
So we have to, you know, study. We have to make sure this is what's being taught correctly at the schools, but we have to make sure we're getting into the schools. You know what
mhm,
I mean?
mhm.
Because there's like, yeah, these business programs. So a lot of the younger people aren't playing. They see these tricks and they're not playing. Um, but then it's a matter of who has access to these, who's going to school. So you might have some hip hop artists that, I mean, I don't know a lot of hip hop artists, you know, that had to get a degree to become a great hip hop artist, right?
Mhm.
So you know, I think that the good thing is there's the other side of that, especially in hip hop, because they were actually the first I think, well, it was done in jazz too, but just not as much as it was in hip hop. But the first group to really start pushing back with these labels to saying, no, we're going to own our own music. You know, Master P, he was a great example of how to do that. He was, started off printing albums and selling them in his
Trunk. Huh?
car, trunk, right?
Yeah.
But
Mm.
he then had gold records and golden and platinum records.
Mhm.
And so this was a phenomenon, but it started the idea of we don't need to sign our life away. We don't need to sign these deals that say in perpetuity. So that's the first language that you want to get rid of. If you want something just concrete,
Mhm.
any young artist, don't sign anything that says in perpetuity, unless it's
Mm.
something that you're really willing to give away um, forever.
Mm.
So what's happened is a model has uh, come forth that most people are doing, which is licensing their music, because a lot of
Okay.
people don't want to start a label. They don't want to do all the things, marketing, manufacturing, um, uh, distribution. They don't want to do all that. So they'll sign a license deal, which gives ownership of their music for a certain amount of time for the term of the license, whether it's 10
Okay.
years or whatever it is. And then all of the rights, all of the music, everything reverts back to you. So that's a model that people are doing.
Okay.
But, when you have big labels and artists like Angie Stone and all these, other big artists, and they're making deals, you kind of sometimes don't know exactly what the label is doing. So you have to then audit the labels. And a lot of people don't want to be bothered with that, nor do they feel like they can afford to do that. But that's the way that you really find out, what's happening or what's happened. Personally, I don't sell enough records to audit a label. I look at putting my records out for critical acclaim and for my career moving forward as a performer, as a thought leader, as all the things, as a consultant, all the things that I do. I have to have records out to make sure that happens. But I'm not making records to make money, so to
Oh.
say. No, definitely not. Not from the records, but
I
from the other
understand.
things that the
Okay.
record brings.
Yeah, I see.
So that's why you had these legendary, renegade uh, people like Sam Cooke, who had his own label. And then if you watch The Two Killings of Sam Cooke, the documentary, it talks about, how did he die and who killed him. And because he was doing something that wasn't happening, so much at the time. And so there has been, artists and Black folks that understand the business. And
Mhm.
but you're right. Sometimes you're so driven by the the desire to create something and for the world to see it that
Mhm.
you're going to, take a bad.
Compromise.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
sometimes and honestly, sometimes that might not be the worst thing in the world. I
Mhm.
remember asking, because a lot of publishing deals when people were young were not good, right? I have many friends that wrote for Michael Jackson, and various friends that had to give away uh, like 100% of their publishing, which is half of the money they got because a song is split in two parts: a writer's share and a publisher's share. And I think that whole thing was designed from the beginning to make sure that other people made money on this stuff. Because now the model is you have a publisher that
Mhm.
does the work and they get now like an administration fee, and that might be
Yeah.
10% or whatever it is, not all of your publishing on top of all of your writer's share. So uh I was gonna say, like, okay, Valerie Simpson, she's a friend of mine, and she wrote, all these big hits for Motown, but she was a young writer, still in her late teens when she got this deal. And so Berry Gordy took the publishing, and they, had their writers, and this is what happened all the time, especially with young writers. But one day I asked her, um, do you regret that? Like, because he eventually got out of that deal and then made another deal that was more like the admin deal, right? So I asked her, do you regret that? And she said, no, because I would rather have 100%. Wait, let me get this right. No, she said, no, because I would rather have 50% of something rather than 100% of
Instead of
nothing.
nothing.
You know, and that like really made me think, yes, sometimes, you make these deals and no, you're not regretful because things happen. And then you learn along the way and you make sure it doesn't happen again. But
Yeah,
also you got to give some things away sometimes. Sometimes you have to
yeah.
share.
It's just me, I'm a lightweight activist, I guess. I don't know if I'm froze or not. Okay, I'm a lightweight activist, and I'm just tired of the exploitation of black folks across the board. It just bothers the crap of me.
Mhm.
And let me watch myself so I don't say nothing bad. But the industry and those who run the industry and how the things were set up, man, and it just bothers me because I see situation after situation. We got George Clinton around there, 90 years old, still. I mean, he was trying to still make some money to take care of himself, and you got the OJs and all these people, giving up themselves, to the industry almost half and all their lives, and still trying to, make that lick. You can go into the sports arena, how now just now start giving college basketball players a little something, and we've been being used, and then the movie industry. It just seemed like it just, continues on and on and on about black folks being, we running up and down the field and up and down the court. We can barely even own any, we still only getting small pieces of owning those particular teams, but it's our talent pool that is being exploited all the time. It just bothers me. It bothers me. And I do a program in June. I was trying to do some Black History stuff in June around before Juneteenth was popular, and I always wanted to. I just couldn't get nobody to have somebody come in and talk about the mechanics and the business side of the record industry, because all our kids, children, they trying to get a record deal. They passing around their CDs around trying to get on and stuff. But a lot of us don't know the business industry side of that. So that was a seminar that I wanted to do.
Yeah, I think like what you're pointing to also is, sometimes some of it's generational. So when you have these legacy artists that are still struggling, what does that mean? Like, how do we allow that to happen? Just like we're looking at restorative justice projects, that are dealing with racism and looking at the history and how do we address it so that reparations and all these different things happening that are being talked about. But yes, that needs to be discussed and looked at, with the music industry too, so that we don't have these legacy artists struggling. How do we have restorative justice in the arts? And I never even put those sentences together. So I thank you for saying that, because I'm thinking, yeah, you're right. We have to do better with our elders. And so actually, now that I said that, though, I'm on the advisory board with the Mellon Foundation, not board, but like an advisory committee for an elders program, because the Mellon Foundation is putting millions of dollars into jazz. And one of those areas is granting money to elders, to jazz elders. So people that are over, I think 62 or 63, that are eligible to get $100,000. And so the first group was just announced. So there are people that are looking at it, but not nearly enough, right? And jazz is such an art form that, there's not much money in it anyway. So jazz elders are really, struggling. But yeah, across the board, R&B, Black artists in general, are struggling. So I think we have to look at this kind of restorative justice. So thank you for bringing that up. But you're right, sports is across the board. So yeah. But some of the people are
Yes.
getting their money, so
I would.
yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, I just heard
Great.
about the awards that were passed out a few weeks ago, and $100,000 is really meaningful to someone who has not been in the loop, so to speak, and not getting all the benefits that someone that has that traditional 9 to 5 and corporate pedigree in their retirement. Before
Mhm.
we wind the show up, I just wanted to have you talk about your relationship with Esperanza Spalding. I know she is a former Berkeley person, and you all have done some very meaningful things together. So, could you tell
Mhm.
us about how you and Esperanza connected and some of the fruits that your relationship has borne?
Mhm. Well, when I started teaching at Berkeley 20 years ago, when I got there, the president at the time, well, actually, he came to LA and to visit before I moved back, and basically asked me to come back to teach. And he gave me a CD of a recording that Esperanza had done with Christian Scott and some of the other young hot people at Berkeley at the time that Pat Metheny had produced for them, some kind of Berkeley project. And I don't think I even really got a chance to listen to it. I did, but it was in passing. So, but when I got there, the very first performance I did, like a few days after I got there, he put her and I together, and she was on it. And then my eyes really opened. I was like, wow, she can really play. And from that moment, uh, I wanted to play with her because I hadn't yet really played with a female bass player that I felt like, I could just really be myself with. Um, and so it just felt like, because bass and drums, is so important, that connection. So I felt like some kind of circle had closed, like, okay, here we are finally, you know. And the first gig that I hired her for was in Israel at the Red Sea Jazz Festival. And her first record was about to come out. And I also hired Jerry Allen for that gig and Tineke Postma. So it was a quartet gig. She's a Dutch uh, saxophone player that I had done a lot of work with. And so when I hired them, I did not think about hiring all women. It wasn't until after I called all of them that I realized I had called all women. And I was the person that had shied away from any all-female projects because I didn't want to, be labeled anything, and I didn't want,
Mhm.
it to be a gimmick or all these things in my mind. And when I realized I did that just purely because I loved the way all of them played, I realized it was a moment for me, a transformative moment. And then I started this project called the Mosaic Project with the four of them, and it expanded to being 21 women on the first Mosaic Project album. So that's how our relationship started. And then she called me to be on her album, Chamber Music Society, and then again on Radio Music Society. Uh, and, I played with her live as well for the Chamber Music Society shows that supported that album. And that when that album came out, that's when she won Best New Artist. Well, she actually won for the previous album, but somehow the way that works is you can be out for a few years and you're still considered Best New Artist. So I think it was all within those two albums. And, we've worked a lot together since then. We did a trio together with Jerry Allen before she passed. And yeah, we've tributed Wayne Shorter in recent times. We did uh, like an album of live at the Detroit Jazz Festival, which was um, it was crazy for me because I have an album called New Standards, which is music from a book that I put out called New Standards 101 Lead Sheets of Women Composers. So I put an album out with 11 of those songs, and it was nominated for a Grammy as well as the live in Detroit at the Detroit Jazz Festival album with Esperanza and Wayne Shorter and Leo Genovese. So I had two albums in the same category. New Standards won the Grammy, but Wayne Shorter and Leo won for Best Solo, Improvised Solo. So that was the last Grammy that Wayne won which is beautiful. And Esperanza also wrote, of course, an opera with Wayne. So I've played orchestral shows with her in the last couple of years, tributing Wayne Shorter.
Okay. We're going to wrap up the terrestrial broadcast. And if you're, with your permission, we'll go into a little bit over time. I don't want to hold you too much, but I have a couple more questions that I want to ask you related to the music. I would also like to remind folks that we will have a live show at Larchmere Arts this evening at 7 o'clock. So Boulevard right there in the heart of the Larchmere Cultural Arts District. Brother Hamtonio, anything that you have before we part ways on the radio?
No, they just enjoyed the information and the talking. I think Miss Carrington, I thank you for coming on, and I just wanted to say that we definitely need more education in that arena.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay.
It's been nice talking to you.
All right. Okay, we're going to hang on for about 10 minutes, but I just want to reiterate the concert at the Maltz Performing Arts Center, which will take place on Friday the 28th. You can get your tickets by going to the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra website. I'll drop a link to that in the description for this video. And with that, we will also acknowledge our engineer, Tone Harley. And I got to tell y'all, Mercury retrograde is wreaking havoc, because there were moments in this broadcast where I was not able to hear or see, but thankfully you all were engaged in meaningful conversation. So the folks who are listening on the radio were still able to pick things up. So thank you to you all for listening on AM 1490 WERE. We will be going live exclusively on YouTube and Facebook in just a matter of moments. Again, big ups, Tone Harley. You do it for us. You come through for us, and we really appreciate it. With that, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your absolute best day. Peace.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
All right. So we're live on Facebook and YouTube. And Terry, I know you have an extensive background. You had a grandfather who was into music and so forth. It's happening again, I take it. I just have to ask you, you weren't someone that was new to music or musicians or dealing with folks who had extensive pedigrees in the music, but at some point you got a call from Herbie Hancock. And I'm just wondering what it was like for you to get that call and to connect with someone who, in the eyes of many, is one of the greatest to have ever put his hands on a piano.
Okay, I'm going to answer that, but I just want to be clear on what you said right before that. You said that I wasn't in I'm just trying to frame like what you said before that, because it sounded like you said that I came from, I was third generation musician, which is correct, my father and my grandfather, but that I wasn't kind of in the mix with all the jazz, kind of high-end jazz players.
I meant that you were.
Oh, okay.
That you were in the mix. Yeah, right, you were in the mix, but you get this call from Herbie Hancock, and it's like, well, he's just another guy, or maybe he's someone that all your life you wanted to work with. Sure.
Okay, so just just for people that don't know, I mean, when I grew up, I had, like some of the greatest jazz musicians in the world coming by my house, because my father knew everybody. When I say everybody, he knew everybody. So, Cannonball Adderley, Nat Adderley, Papa Joe Jones, Clark Terry, all these people were coming by, sometimes spending the night. And I would get to sit in and play gigs as a teenager with Dizzy Gillespie and Clark Terry, and I hang out with Ella Fitzgerald. In fact, she was the person that told Oscar Peterson that he should hear me play when I was 11, and we were all at a show that they were doing together, and then he had me sit in, and that's how I got my scholarship to Berkeley. So it was a very, very crazy type of childhood. When I look back, it's like a movie. But yes, throughout all that, you're listening to these great records. Miles Davis and John Coltrane records were kind of like, the epitome of jazz at the time, right? And so I remember there was one record Herbie did live. It's called VSOP, and it was a live performance with Ron Carter, Tony Williams, Wayne, Herbie, and Freddie Hubbard. And when he introduced everybody, he said, "The greatest Ron Carter, the greatest Tony Williams, the greatest Wayne Shorter, etc." And I just remember as a teenager saying, "Yeah, one day, I want that to be me. I want to, be hearing that, from Herbie Hancock, or just, feeling that." And so it's interesting because he called me first when, I don't know, maybe I was 18 or so. I hadn't moved to New York yet, so maybe I was 17 or 18. But he called because Eddie Henderson, who was his trumpet player at the time, well, not at the time, but in the M1 band, Eddie Henderson told him to call me. And so he did, but nothing came of it. But we spoke on the phone. I was just psyched that Herbie Hancock called me. And then later I got the gig with Wayne Shorter. And then we did some, benefits, a couple of gigs where I was able to play with Herbie. And then that's what started the relationship with him. So I played in probably like 5 or 6 of Herbie's different configurations. But yes, that was a
Okay.
big deal. And then I actually did hear, those words,
Mm.
like, however he said it, but it was, so it kind of, to me, it's like you have to have a crystallized vision of what you want in your life. And if you work hard and you have the talent, it can happen. And, that's what that proved to me.
Okay. Working with Wayne Shorter, who again was one of the greatest to ever do that. Can you just reflect on how meaningful it was for you to connect with him on that musical level, and to do that performance that was a trip?
Um, well, to connect with Wayne, I mean, that was kind of my big break. Uh, I was 21 when I got the gig with Wayne Shorter. And I saw that as my big break, because it brought me all over the world. And it just brought, my name to a different level, recognition to a different level. And I met so many amazing people like Herbie Hancock through him. But musically, too, he was a musical mentor, a spiritual mentor. I, was playing with him during his more fusion kind of time period, which was different for me because I had been playing mostly straight ahead. But, I leaned into it, and I loved, Weather Report, when I really listened to their music. So I leaned into it, but it wasn't, my experience so much at the time. But it was, I think, just my knowledge of jazz and the pedigree of who I came from that he really appreciated. And then I started playing a little bit with him as he started moving away from the fusion time period. But when he did the album Allegria, I was on half of that, and Brian Blade was on the other half. And then I couldn't finish the other half, and that's why Brian got called, because I was playing with Herbie. So that became the Wayne Shorter Quartet, which is great. But my relationship stayed with him. But I did feel like I didn't have the chance to develop with him in that highly creative, improvisatory setting, like the quartet did. So when we did that gig at the Detroit Jazz Festival, without really having a rehearsal or any shows before it, um, we just did it, and it felt like, a little bittersweet in a way, because I wondered what I would have sounded like if I had had time, over years, playing that way, um, which I didn't have, but it still felt like a full circle moment of being able to really play with Wayne in this highly creative setting. And I subbed for Brian on a few gigs, and Wayne wanted some of it to come out on his records, but this is going back to what you said, Antonio, about the business, because the Blue Note got involved, and even though Wayne himself wanted me to be on some of his last live records, because I did some live shows, and all of his records with the quartet are live. But he wanted that. But I mean, what I'm understanding is that because it was the quartet, that Don was, and the people running Blue Note, really thought it should stay the way it was. And for me, it would have been important, and it may still happen because they're going to supposedly put out some more. But yeah, how does that make me feel? Yeah, it makes me feel that the business came before the music.
Seems like that's always the case. Can you talk about what you're going to do with CJO when you come to Cleveland later this month?
Yes. So Paul Ferguson has done some new arrangements of songs of mine that haven't been arranged yet for a big band. So I'm very excited to hear them. I haven't heard them yet. And a couple of songs are songs that are yet to be released for a forthcoming album project that I'm involved with called Baker's Dozen, which Henry Threadgill put together with 13 different artists, and it will come out as a box set. So I gave Paul 2 of those songs to arrange, and then he grabbed some other songs from my Jazz is a Spirit album to arrange. So I'm looking forward to hearing those and playing those. And he has one of his songs. He has a Mary Lou Williams song also, and a Lil Hardin Armstrong song that he's arranged for this.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it promises to be a phenomenal performance. I'm so looking forward to hearing and seeing, and I'm going to have to look through my collection because I have some shots of you in Detroit that are just phenomenal. I shot some from above, looking at the stage below at Hart Plaza. And then I have some other shots of you where you were in the shadows of the stage before the concert actually began. So it was really a meaningful moment. And I have to tell you that one of the most memorable concerts, and I've been covering the Detroit Jazz Festival since 1991. One of the most memorable concerts was that moment with Wayne Shorter. I don't know why it stands out. You can listen to the Detroit Jazz Festival recording. I know it's on Spotify. I listened to it last night. It is absolutely magical. I don't know what classification you would put on it, because when I think of it, it just seems like it was very ethereal. It was very organic. It was very in the moment. It, like you said, it wasn't something that seemed like it was rehearsed. It seemed like you all were listening to each other and playing off each other and going where the music took you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what you have to do with Wayne, especially in the last 20 years, of his artistry. It was all in the moment. And so you have themes and a common repertoire. Some of his pieces, or we threw in a Jerry Allen song too, because she was supposed to be on that gig and she passed away before it happened. But otherwise, the rest of the music was Wayne's. And it's kind of like, how it was written, and then you have to deconstruct it. Anything goes. So you might play part of it and then just improvise for 10 minutes and then bring in another part of it, So you have to be so open. And somehow just magically we were connected that night. And I'm so happy that we were able to release that project.
Yes. And I'm so happy that it has been preserved for eternity and we have access to it on the internet. Terry Lynn Carrington, thank you for joining us on 360 Info Network today.
Thank you for having me. And hopefully I'll see you in person.
Oh, you will. I'm going to be stage left in full view of the drum set so that we can get some really great shots of you again. So looking forward, and we'll see you on the 28th.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me.
All
Amen.
right.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to all, and to everyone, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your absolute best day. Peace.
Peace. All right.